Hello. Hello, everybody. I hope you have done your exam well. And I know this is after the exam, and we are in the analysis mode and we are looking at the key. Uh, we are now here to look at the critical reasoning, which is like logical reasoning, and analyze the questions, analyze the passages, and understand why the key, why we have certain questions, why the answers to those questions. And if you talk about logical reasoning paper this year, this would be a medium paper. It's not tough because the passages are pretty readable. Some questions, however, are tricky. Like there are like close options that are there. Otherwise, it would be definitely a medium paper. And we will go one by one, of course. Sorry, we will go one by one to look at it. And today, with this first passage, we will look at the certain questions and answers that we will have here. If you see the first passage, how was the first passage? It was fairly okay. It seemed like something analytical, something data based, factual. However, if you see, the questions are pretty easy, pretty straightforward, and easy to answer. In what are the key elements of the passage? It is talking about biodiversity and also what are the actions that are need to be taken in the future, especially if you take like here GBF. GBF is the main part here, Global Biodiversity Framework. That is like the major part here. Sorry. So that will be the whole passage is talking about how we'll have to take in forward. So there are some steps that are taken already, and those did not work. And what should we do next? We should go for global biodiversity framework, and how will it happen? And what are the challenges with it? So that is the passage about, right? And if you look at the first question, so, as per the passage, which of the following is a challenge for implementation of post 2020 global biodiversity framework? So here, like we have here, unfulfillment of the pre 2020 global biodiversity targets. That's not true. If you see, currently referred to as the post 2020 global biodiversity framework. That itself is called post 2020. So it cannot be pre 2020, first of all. So, and the challenges of implementation of post 2020 cannot be unfulfillment of the pre 2020 global biodiversity targets. It cannot be. I mean, it's not talking about it at all. So, that is definitely not the option. And if you see the next one, clarity of action plan for society and government, that's what they're talking about, isn't it? So, let's see, for example, success will require systemic change. Systemic change across the public policy. This sees both a strength and weakness. If systemic change can be implemented, it will lead to real change. But if it cannot, there is no plan B. So this is where it comes in, like the society and also public policy and the government. Like systemic change as part of the society, every part of it, right? It takes time, systemic change. So that is what they are talking about. And so here when they said systemic change, it has to be clarity of action plan for the society and government, for the society and government. That will be the answer, isn't it? But let's see the other ones also. Threat of mass extinction, that is not a challenge. Can we implement it? Can we implement this GBF in a better way? That's the challenge that we have right now. And it is hard. It is hard to implement it because it's systemic change. So that's why it will be B. And C and D are completely out of context. Here, if you see D, failure of plan to save ecosystem is not part of the challenge at all. So B will be the answer. According to the passage, why do some researchers advocate that one biodiversity target be prioritized? Because if you go back again, check. So some researchers here in the last lines, some researchers to argue that why one target or number should be prioritized and defined in a way that it is clear to the public and to policymakers. Why? Because GBF is a comprehensive ban and it will be systematic change. This is a both strength and weakness. If systematic change can be implemented, it will lead to real change. But if it cannot, there is no plan B. This led to the some researchers to argue that one target and number. So if it doesn't succeed, if it cannot implement in the systematic way, definitely there is no plan B. That's why some researchers argue that one target or a number should be prioritized. So if you see, systemic policy change is difficult to implement. That's exactly is the reason. But let's see others also. Biodiversity, okay. Post 2020 Global Biodiversity Framework (GBF) is comprehensive. That isn't why. If you read before, if you read that line and before those lines, you see that clearly that they are trying to say if it is hard to implement, we better focus on something that we can engage in. So definitely it has to be A and not B. Then if you see C2, the climate targets need to be again. This is something as given as example. That's not part of the challenges or anything else. Biodiversity needs to be valued, conserved. Again, this is not why researchers are advocating to go for one research or something. A will be the reason because it is hard to implement. They are going for that suggestion, right? It's an easy question. Definitely. See, I would say this passage is extremely easy and very scoring. I hope you did well. I hope you kind of scored well in this passage. Which of the following is the correct expression of author's opinion as stated in the passage? Implementation of post 2020 global framework allows no middle ground for success or failure. Could be. Again, let's keep it aside. It is high time that countries reevaluate the progress in achieving biodiversity targets. Biodiversity conservation should be prioritized over climate change. Now, B and C, if you look at it, that's not author's opinion. Like it is high time that countries reevaluate the progress in achieving. They are already in that stage. That's why they went for GBF, right? They're already in that stage. However, they're not sure if it's going to be success or failure. Whereas C, the biodiversity conservation should be prioritized over climate change. Again, there is no comparison here for us to say that biodiversity or climate change or anything. So we can't say that. The post 2020 global biodiversity framework is the best way to prevent mass extinction. Again, mass extinction post global, this is not something they are talking about. In general, global biodiversity framework is in general for the whole biodiversity and other parts of the climate, but that's not really the author is not saying that is the best way or the better way or the this is one of the ways that they are thinking, right? So yes, it will be A. Implementation. Why? Because let's go back and see once. Because again, there is no plan B. Remember, there is no plan B. It's either success or failure. So there is no plan B. That way, it has to be no middle ground. It has to be success or failure. Next question, which of the following is the central theme of the above passage? The reason for failure of biodiversity conservation efforts at global level, the interrelationship between biodiversity conservation and climate change, the future of biodiversity conservation efforts at global level, the role of United Nations in biodiversity conservation at global level. Now, what is the central theme again? See, if you see, they started by saying some of the schemes, some of the policies that were already there were failures now, and we are now moving towards something as future plan, that is GBF, and that could be there could be challenges to it, but this is something that people are thinking to go for, right? That is the whole passage, and if you see, now that's why we will probably think it is more like future, isn't it? Future plan for conservation efforts at global level. And that's why reason for failure of biodiversity conservation efforts at global level, that's not it. I mean, do we have reasons? I don't know. I mean, there are not. Yes, they mention, but that's not the central theme. Parts of it are mentioned in the first paragraph, sure, but that's not the central theme. That's like it's moving forward to introduce GBF. Right, and interrelationship between biodiversity conservation and again, there is no comparison here. So A and B are eliminated. The role of United Nations, no, that's not the center. Yes, they could have mentioned as something as a example or something, but that's not the central theme. So yes, as in future has to be the central theme. Right, which of the following can be inferred from the above passage? Okay, now this is also, we solve the previous questions. By previous questions itself, we should be able to solve this because the whole point again, GBF is it either a success or a failure? There is no plan B, it is the only way. So if you see the questions are pretty straightforward. If you get one question right, you're going to get all the questions right because they are very like a same kind of question, very similar questions. And yes, P will be the answer, can be a boon or a bane, can be a success or a failure. Again, there is no middle way for it. That's exactly what we saw in the previous question as well. So this is not something new. This question is not something new. So it's a very scoring passage, right? So we don't know if it's going to be only a boon or a bane or anything else. We know it can be a boon or a bane. That's it. So the next one, if you see D, the post 2020 Global Biodiversity Framework includes. This is not something like includes or anything. Yes, that includes, but more like we are talking about what it will do, what GBF will do for the future climate, for the future biodiversity, right? That's why it can be either a boom or a bane, as in it can be either a success or a failure. It can be a blessing or a about the problem that it can be. So that is what we are talking about. And this will be the first passage. So as you see, I think this is probably in the main in the main master paper. It will be first, second, and a third passage. You have it as the third passage. This one. Okay. So next one, Russia and Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine again. This one is like it's talking about fossil fuels. This one I would say, as compared to the previous passage, it's slightly difficult because again, it's the questions are kind of confusing, tricky in the sense. Some questions, not all. And definitely you could have attempted at least three correct for sure. If you are confused about one or two questions, that is okay. I mean, if there were like close options in this passage, that's still fine. But we can see like how we can eliminate, how we can go about it. We can see some tricks in it. However, like this passage, we will go about it. And so this one, it is talking about two recent developments have brought reliance on fossil fuel into sharp focus. Russian-Ukraine conflict and consequent surge in the crude oil price rolled in the economy. Separately, the most recent IPCC report on climate highlighted the energy sector's range. Now, this whole passage is about energy, like how we are kind of on the low point here for the energy sources. Since we went for like IPCC report, climate highlighted the energy sector large contribution to global warming, and both these developments need to be located in the context of India's pledge to get net zero carbon emissions by 2070. So since we pledged that we are not going for carbon emissions and fossil fuels, and we are not also going for a certain for energy, right? So also this one, Russia Ukraine, in the context of this war, what is happening to India's energy source? That's what this passage about. And particularly it focuses on the nuclear, right? Nuclear power. And if you see about like after three, four lines, it is talking about nuclear with renewable solar energy has lavished. Okay. However, it won't be enough to meet targets. had written India can't meet its net zero commitment without nuclear power. So look at this. If, in this way, we can also understand author's view, isn't it? Net zero. So we can't go for the net zero commitment without nuclear power. So we kind of need. So author is in agreement with that we need nuclear power, right? He is right. See, again, you have an opinion here, author's opinion, that we need nuclear power. We are in need of nuclear power. It is an area where the India was off to an early start, developed relatively high indigenous capabilities, etc. Right. So let's see the questions. What is the central idea of the passage as conveyed by the author? Again, see, if you see the, for example, see, there can be a close option first of all. Let's see one by one. India needs to increase use of nuclear power. You see that author agrees with that. Author is in agreement with that. We already saw it. So let's keep it aside. India needs to increase production of fossil fuels. No, I mean by 2070 we are targeting to reduce the emissions zero, etc. We are trying to make. So that's not true. Next one, India needs to enter in multilateral agreements addressing use of nuclear power. Now this one we already are in agreement, right? I mean, so we are already are in agreement with the Russia and etc. However, that cannot be the central idea. Central idea, if you see, it is about like how helpful it will be if we increase the nuclear power. So it will be kind of helpful even for the future targets that we have as a country, and also for other contexts that like Russia and other, even for the crude oil prices, whatever it is. It is better for us to increase the usage of nuclear power, right? So that's what it is targeting at, and that's why it will be A. Again, understand this can be slightly tough question if you are like since the language is slightly tough as compared to the other passage, and there can be slight confusion between A and C. But if you see about it, that's not the C is not the central theme, but the A definitely talks about how author's intention behind writing this passage, author's purpose behind writing this passage. So A will be a better option for it. So next one, D talks about nuclear energy is a renewable source of power. That, I mean, author is not trying to prove what it is. Author is, this passage is not about that. So we can't say D as the one. Okay. Now, according to the author, which of the following measures will not help? Will not help India achieve its pledge of net zero carbon emissions by 2070. Now, this is more like a common sense question if you think about it, because like for us to have zero carbon emissions, what will not be helpful? That is the question. It's not even connected to passage. We can answer without reading the passage. That's easy. This is because logistic changes. That's not. It's part of it, right? It's part of it. And the logistic. If you see, for example, meeting this pledge requires here in this line. Meeting this pledge requires overhaul of both the logistics and electricity sectors to reduce reliance on fossil fuels. So now logistic changes is required. It's not like helping. So it is not it's definitely required in reducing the fossil fuels. Logistic changes in the electricity sector, that also they mentioned, like changes in the electricity sector are also something that we need to achieve in order to reach the target, right? So B is also not the one. If you see reduction in the use of solar power, if you know solar power, that is not a carbon emission power, that is not a fossil fuel, and it is something that we have to go for. It's renewable power, and it is something that we have to go for in order to reduce our carbon print, right? Even if you think normally also we know this. So see, like let's look at D. Increase in the use of nuclear power. This is also author is going for as like the reduce the carbon print. We are going for that. So C is the obvious answer. Again, as I said, this is more like a general knowledge question rather than something related to the passage. You don't need to be confused by it. Although questions seem to be slightly framed in the sense to confuse you. I agree that it is slightly tricky. However, if you read it clearly, it is very easy, and C is the obvious answer. Next one, according to the author, which of the following is not the effect of India's reliance on fossil fuels? Again, reliance on fossil fuels, if you see, not the effect of reliance on fossil fuels. Global warming, let's look at these questions once again. So here, look at this. The most recent IPCC, okay, reliance on fossil fuels into sharp focus. The Russia-Ukraine conflict and the consequent surge in the, okay. So what are the effects of this, right? Effects of this is basically like both these developments need to be located in the context of India's pledge. And also before that, it is mentioned IPCC report on climate highlighted the energy sector's large contribution to global warming. So global warming effect was there. And sorry, increase in the crude oil prices. That is also there. Like not the effect of India's reliance. If we do rely on fossil fuels, just think about it. Forget the passage, but think about it. If we do rely on fossil fuels, what happens? There will be global warming. There will be increase in the crude oil prices, that is fossil fuel prices. There will be less reliance on renewable sources of power like solar and other wind powers, etc. Right? So that is also there. And the only thing that is not related, that is not the effect of reliance of fossil fuel, is this. This is not relevant to the passage at all. These not relevant to the passage at all, and this is not the effect. This is not the effect by relying on fossil fuels. If you see other three, global warming is an effect. If you do rely on fossil fuels, you will have global warming, and crude oil prices will increase, and also we will rely on renewable sources of power less. Like we will not rely on them, like solar power, etc. So C will be the answer. If again this is a question that can confuse you, this is again very general knowledge kind of question. Even if you're not that into the passage, you can still read it. And if you are like, if you have some knowledge about like climate change, global warming in general, you can still answer this, because other three are like obvious ones. There are effects of fossil fuels, right? But even then, even through the passage also, we can definitely go easily with this. This is definitely an easy question, but the next questions can be slightly tricky. And this one definitely a tough question. I would say medium to difficult, right? According to the author, which of the following is the effect of India-United States civil nuclear deal? Right? Export import target with United States, removal of bottlenecks for self-reliance and power generation, nuclear defense pact with now. This one again you need to be slightly in the sense of export import target. Now what it is, which of the following is the effect of India United States civil nuclear deal, right? Let's see the deal once. One second. So the deal did open to a stable supply of uranium or from so Canada and other places. However, the desired subsequent bill on civil liability for nuclear damage killed the prospect of the particular. Sorry, one second. I'll read here. Prospect. Right. Deal definitely did it. Okay. Now this one, what are they saying? Deal definitely did make it problem, like a design of subsequent bill on civil liability for nuclear damage killed the prospect of participation of Western firms. So that's what they're talking about, Western firms, participation of Western firms. India's main partner. See, the question is tricky in the sense that, like what is the effect, following is the effect of India United States civil nuclear deal. Export import target with the United States, okay, that is not the effect at all. Okay, a nuclear defense pact with it already has, it is not the effect of, I mean it's already getting from there. It's not that many people get, okay, can get confused with C. C definitely is like a close option in the sense, but it's slightly tricky in that sense. However, if you see, it's already in pact with the Kazakhstan, right? So it's not really about in going with the defense pact with them. That's not it. Self-reliance in solar power, that's not the effect of it. But removal of bottlenecks for self-reliance. Now, see, the passage is about nuclear power, isn't it? Nuclear power and how we need to use it more. So even if you see B, removal of bottlenecks of self-reliance in power generation. That is something that we are targeting, right? So if we can have more power generation, more nuclear power, that would be helpful also. So that way, B definitely is the answer. Even though, as I said, it can be tricky, but definitely B will be an answer if you eliminate the other options, right? Next one, according to the author, Western firms lost the opportunity of doing business in the nuclear production in India because. Again, a slightly tough question from medium to difficult. But yes, we'll have to be slightly clear about what we have to understand. So, what are they saying? Western firms lost the opportunity of doing business in the nuclear production in India because. So, again, just let's go back to the question passage. Sorry, I can't see here, so I'm just going back to the paper in my hand. Um, yeah, Western firms, when they mention, right, the design of subsequent bill and civil liability of nuclear damage kill the prospect of participation of Western firms. Okay, what did they kill? So, because like the subsequent bill and civil liability, right, and also civil liability, right? So, if you see, okay, wait. Yes. If you see, like civil bill, subsequent bill, and civil liability are the reasons. That's what they mentioned. So they had to pay hefty penalties for the delay in supply. That's not true. That's not the point at all. They do not find nuclear power profitable. Again, not the one that we are looking for. They do not agree with India's place of nuclear plants. No, that is also not the part. They fail to circumvent internal laws by other bilateral instruments. Now, this one is talking about the laws, and also we saw that subsequent laws and civil liability. That's what we saw as the main part that Western firms lost the opportunity, right? So this has to be the one, even though they framed it in a different way. It is the only option that's talking about it. So it will be the option. Okay. So this will be the end of the second passage. Yes, it is slightly tough passage as compared to other passages. But if you see, most often in these questions, at least three you can surely answer. And only two questions were slightly tough. And that's okay. I hope you kind of like use the elimination method and used some like, okay, going back to the passage and reading particular line. Like for example, when they said Western firms, go back to the passage and read that the particular line that is mentioned, where it is mentioned, Western firms and all. Okay. So next passage is about under COVID-19 outbreak, universities and schools. So now this is about online education, right? So on 2019, under the COVID-19 outbreak, universities and schools around the world had suspended face-to-face classes to prevent the rapid spread of virus. So like this passage is talking about how there was a need for a change and how it was difficult suddenly for all the people, especially the teachers and universities and schools, etc., for them to change the method, change the methodology of teaching, suddenly going to something new. So that's what they are talking about. Look at this. For those without sufficient knowledge or experience for effective online teaching, this sudden transition was particularly challenging. In normal circumstances, designing an online course follows a systematic instructional design process with a careful consideration of the unique characteristics of the target learner groups and chosen careful consideration of those. So they're talking about, and before that also, look at this sudden disruption to face-to-face education reshaped pedagogical practices and led to the rapid adoption of the online teaching university. Subsequently, academics working at the universities at the front line of those changes faced enormous levels of pressure and disturbance to their professional roles and practices. So they had to go through a lot. They had to go through a lot in order to shift to the online teaching. That's what he's talking about, this particular passage. Let's see the questions. The objective behind the information furnished in the passage. Now, what is the objective? Like, what would you say as the objective? To examine the experiences faced by the teachers because of the sudden transition from the offline to online mode of teaching due to the outbreak of COVID-19. This is very specific. This answers the question definitely, but let's see the other options also. To identify, to identify the differences between online and offline mode of teaching. That's not what we are doing, isn't it? Like, we are not trying to identify the differences. We are talking about how the shift was hard for the teachers and universities as well. So definitely not the B. To reveal the side effects of COVID-19, absolutely irrelevant. We can eliminate it right away. Next one, to understand the need to be able to cope with crisis-like situation even in the educational sector. This one talks about it. Definitely talks about the passage, whatever it is. But however, it is not really to understand the need. We are not talking about the need to understand. We are talking about how we are not prepared to do it. How people had to suffer to in order to shift. We understand, all of us understand the need. That's not the point. But how people are not really ready for the sudden transition, right? So A will be a better answer. Okay. Based on the ideas presented in the paragraph, it will not be possible to draw out useful recommendations for the situations like pandemic unless the factors required to contribute to the quality education online and okay, that is not really at all. That's not what we are talking about. It will not be possible to draw out useful recommendations unless. So we'll have to look at something like which is mandatory for particular training, which is mandatory for the online education. That's what we are talking about. We need this in order to start online education, right? So that is what we are talking about. Now here, factors required to contribute to quality education offline online modes are not really the ones. And knowledge about infrastructural availability. This is not about availability. This is about training. This is about making them prepared, get them prepared about it. The faculty is given adequate training and experience in providing online education is taking into consideration, definitely. C is the one, definitely, isn't it? So now, what do we mean by it? Like, the faculty needs to be trained, be prepared, just experienced into the technicalities of online mode, and also how to go about it in general also. Next one, a detailed analysis of the comparative performance in the online and offline. No, not analysis. I mean, analysis is not going to help us, right? But rather, definitely the adequate experience and training will help. Next one, what can be most conveniently inferred from the given paragraph? What can be inferred? Right. Let's see one by one. Whether online education, online or face-to-face university teaching activities, genuinely complex tasks involves multiple elements of interlinked activity systems. Okay, this one slightly, yes, slightly we can try to infer it. It has been more challenging for individual academics and institutions to quickly adopt to. Now, this one is the definite part, right? Definite. I mean, B has to be the answer. No doubt about it. Since we have all of the above, we'll see other options also. B is definite. See, the object of online teaching activity requires a fundamental contradiction with the object of previous teaching. Now, when we did say contradiction, fundamental contradiction, it is to say it is almost like the opposite of what we were teaching. It is slightly problematic in that sense, like the formation of this particular word can throw you off if you didn't see that in particular way. However, it can be seen in that like how the methodology which was used in the offline teaching was way different from online teaching. So fundamentally different from online teaching. So that's what they are going for. And in this question, yes, we definitely go with B, but since the key said all of the above, B is definite. Guys. B is definite. Although we are not completely satisfied with the other two, we'll just go with all of the above. All of the above is the key which has given said so. However, like C and A, for example, they are just they can be inferred not directly, not perfectly, as much as B. That is the point that we are going for. Okay. Next one, what suitable policy should be devised by the administrators of the school and the universities in the light of the facts presented in the paragraph? What suitable strategies? Okay, there must be an insight into the complexity. This one is obvious, isn't it? There must be an insight into the complexity of online teaching and need to work for the capacity building for the teachers during the such extraordinary times, and there is a greater need for the teacher community to foster collaborative teaching relationships with other members. This is covering the entire point of the passage, definitely covering every part. So A is the obvious answer, but let's see other options also. The faculty members must be oriented towards the lasting changes brought about to their roles and identities. This is not. I mean, what did they say? What suitable policy decision should be devised? Now we know how the shift shouldn't be very drastic. They should be prepared. When there is such a case, the teachers should be prepared for the online teaching. That is the best way. B is not serving any purpose to the question. Like B is not serving like identity and all. It's not talking about the crisis or the need that the passage is talking about. So not B. It is time to develop a comprehensive understanding of the challenges experienced by individual academics and changes created by those academics. It is not about that. It is about online teaching, and it's not talking about particular academics or something. So, not C. There is a need to develop infrastructure in schools and universities. Schools and universities, again, infrastructure is not something that we are discussing in the passage. We cannot say that is the answer. So, A is the obvious answer. I would say easy question also. Next question, which of the following points most closely supports the fact that present education system lacks the structure to sustain effective training during and after periods of the lockdown? Okay, which of the point most closely supports? Sorry, most closely supports. Now, what did they say? If you think about it, how it was drastic shift from the previous methodology to now, that was the problem, right? If you see now, first option says that there are inadequate applications and platforms for effective online teaching. Now, this is not about resources. We are not talking about resources. So it can't be the option. Next one, shift from online to offline faced with resistance. This is not about how people reacted to online teaching. This is about how people are prepared to even teach. How it was received in the secondary. And it was not mentioned in the passage at all. The next one, the academia's long established roles and identities have been completely altered by the pandemic. Now, this one is talking about the shift, fundamental shift from the long, whatever methodology that they used to follow, and now. So, this is also, I would say, a slightly medium to tough question. Since it's like, should we say completely altered? Because in critical reasoning, we do talk about the extreme options problem. Like we do not want to go for the extremes usually. However, here since they were focusing on the drastic shift, so we have to go for it. Although it is it could be slightly framed better. The completely is throwing us off a little since it's extreme. However, yes, this has to be the answer. The students are interested in online examinations and schools and universities are finding it difficult to shift to. No, this is not the one. I mean, students are interested in online or offline is not the question. Like which of the points most closely supports the fact the present education system lacks the structure. This is not talking about anything lacking the structure. The C is talking about the altering part, like the drastic shift was the problem. That's what C is talking about, right? And This is the next passage, a Madras High Court suggestion to constitutional law. So this is about laughing part, and it is also slightly tricky in the sense to read, right? The readability of this passage is tricky. Like, what are they trying to say? Is something that we need to understand. So if you see first one, for example, first part it's talking about a particular example. So one person actually filed an FIR against a person. Why? Because of a social media post. And what is the post? Post says trip to Sirumalai for shooting practice. That's what the post said. So they filed an FIR against the person, and the court obviously the court definitely did not go for it. And see, look at this one. The judgment draws attention to how what ought to be a reasonable understanding of a situation, right? A reasonable understanding of the situation, and our court quashed the FIR. Definitely quashed the FIR because it's just a innocuous as in harmless post, and it has nothing to do with like offending as such. So initially, the judge is talking about how humor is taken into the context of offense for everything, like how people are getting offended for everything and going for the court. But later on, author and the judge. Judge is talking about how it is important for us to understand law also in the whatever post that we post and whatever it is, we need to understand it reasonably. We can't just go about it. Like here, look at this one. For the police, it appeared as a threat to the wage war, although a judicial magistrate refused to remand law at what? Serious question. The judge said, using holy cow as a metaphor, which varies from person to person, region to region. Being funny is one thing, and the judge rightly said that poking fun at another is different altogether. So we need to find that fine difference, as in a very subtle difference, very nuanced difference between laughing at something and laughing at someone, making fun of someone. So humor and also making fun of someone. That fine difference should be found. That's what the author and the judge are focusing on, right? Let's see the questions. What is the central idea in the passage as conveyed by the author? People need to be sensitive towards the other sensibilities. Okay. Humor is often used to to offend others. Now, understand this. There is an unwelcome decrease in the sense of humor. This is slightly a tough question. Like, why am I saying that? Is like, okay, so initially, author is talking about how humor should not be taken into the account of offending everybody. People get offended for everything and anything. That shouldn't be the case. And in that sense, definitely C definitely will be the answer, of course. However, it could be a close option with A because of a reason that later on, author is talking about how we need to also understand the difference between making fun and also like humor, right? So there it's like sensitive towards others' sensibility is also slightly close in that sense. However, like there is an unwelcome decrease in people's sense of humor will be the main one because it started with it. It started with how quashing that particular FIR and also talking about how it made any sense. It's just an innocuous post, social media post, and people just take offense for everything. That's what the initial paragraph, initial particular lines suggesting us. So C will be the answer. Next ones, I mean, A and C are like close. If you see other options, humor is often used as a garb to offend others is not the one. Definitely not relevant to the passage. Author is talking about how humor can be seen in different ways, but not to offend others. It's not the point of the passage at all. Judiciary should use humor to make judgments. It's absolutely irrelevant. D is irrelevant. Okay. Next one, according to the given passage, which of the following statements is true? Social media is often popularized insensitive and offensive posts. So, wait, popularized insensitive and offensive posts is something that is like a drastic sentence to say. Now, what is it? I mean, what is the author saying? That we need to be careful about what we need to find the fine difference between and what is making fun and also what is humor. Like here, look at this. It should be right of every person to poke fun of others. No, we have to find the humor in everything, but not fun of others. Make fun of others is not okay. At least judge says it's not okay. Creative expressions are bound to be offensive to some other people, some persons. No, that's not the point. I mean, how we are doing it, what we are doing it, and what is the nuanced position, as in the details of it are important. That's what the author and the judge position was that. D, every humorous expression should be understood reasonably and rationally. Yes, only then we will not be offended by everything. Only then we will be able to see the difference between what is making fun and what is just humor. So, yes, D is the answer. Okay. Right. According to the given passage, which of the following is not true? So each expression should be understood according to its context. The word shooting used in a sentence is indicative of waging war. Definitely not. I mean, look at this one. Now, first one is definitely part of the passage. Each expression should be understood in the context of the. Obviously, we'll have to understand, like, is it making fun or is just using humor? Other parts, legal process can be abused if authorities act on the irrational impulses. No, this is not talking about that at all. Next one, expression "holy cow" bears different meaning to for different people. Now, this can be slightly different in the way, but however, this is absolutely true, right? The expression of holy cow bears different meanings for different people is true. So legal process can be abused if authorities who act on their irrational impulses. Is not something that is given directly in the passage. However, by quashing the FIR, by talking about how everything is an offense to everybody, that is definitely part of the passage, isn't it? So now first one also, each expression should be understood in the context of passage is also part. However, the word shooting, let's go back and see. So the trip to Tirumalai for shooting practice, for police it appeared as a threat to wage war. Shooting practice as in probably they're talking about some photo shoot or anything. But either way, they were not talking about any waging war. Police misunderstood that, and author is definitely talking about how police should not have understood it that way. And the judge quashed that also, quashed that FIR that it is waging any war. So definitely it is not waging war. That is what the passage is suggesting. So definitely it will be B. It is not true in the context of the passage. Next one, as per the passage, which of the following approaches can reduce the increasing idiocy and absurdity in the responding to the expressions made in jest? Apologizing upon hurting another person's sentiments, avoiding the use of controversial words, using humor as a means to mitigate conflict, understanding the difference between. I mean, this is something that we have been talking about it, right? Understanding difference between being funny and poking fun of another person, like we need to understand what is funny, what is humor, and also what is hurting other person, right? So that's where we have to draw a line, and that's where the fine difference comes in. So definitely D. And if we understand that, it can definitely reduce the idiocy and absurdity in the responding to expressions. Those who have been at the receiving end for their attempt at humor can draw strength from ruling. But then, a creative process facing combative opposition because of its very nature is anything but funny. Which of the following conclusions can be drawn from the above statement? Now, what does it say? Those who have been at the receiving end further attempt at humor can draw strength from the ruling, as in the how would I from the powerful. But then a creative process facing combative opposition because of its nature is anything but funny. So we need to see what is the meaning. Which of the following conclusions can be drawn from the above statement? We need to see which one is it. Creative and conflict go hand in hand. Creative freedom should not be curbed unreasonably. Creative expressions are strengthened due to challenges faced by the authors. Creative often leads to conflict. Now, understand this. We can't really say that the creativity is one of the main reasons. this leads to conflict. So we can't say this one as the answer, isn't it? So we can't definitely say this creativity is leading to the leading to the war or anything. We can't say that. However, what we can say is like the this creative freedom should not be curbed unreasonably. Or creativity conflict go hand in hand. This is something like this extreme option. And creative expressions are strengthened due to the challenges faced by the authors. This can also not be the one, right? Right. We will look at it. So, what we understand from this particular quotation is that creative freedom should not be curbed. I mean, as the judge says, just because you feel offended for everything doesn't mean that you actually stop posting for anything, right? For everything, you can't be offended. Creative freedom should be there. Yes, of course, you shouldn't be hurting the other person, but creative freedom should be there. It should not be curbed unreasonably. So that will be the answer. Okay. So next one, students decide to attend colleges for several reasons. Now this one is talking about how what students face in college. And see, this is, I think this passage is about like the first passage in the master question paper, right? First passage. It is talking about these reasons include career opportunities, financial stability, intellectual growth. So the author started with positive elements of the college, but later on talked about negative elements, how people are drawing different like because of the pressures, whatever pressures that you face in colleges, the students are facing a lot of problems, right? So competitive academic work, uncertainty about future employment and professional career were also noted as sources of stress. The transition to college represents the process characterized by change. So because of all these are like the stress factors for them. Look at this one. What, according to you, is the objective of the study of the present paragraph? Now, what is the objective of study? If we look at this, to map the various stages of pressure points in the adulthood of the process. Now, definitely it is the one, right? I mean, to map the various stages of pressure points of the adulthood in the process of education. That is the one. If you see anti-family agenda, that's not there. Pinpoint obstacle targeted against meritorious student. This is not about only meritorious student. It is about students in general. So it has to be A. A is the one. Which factors, as per the author, cause more stress among the students, right? So what, I mean, this is a slightly tricky one. What causes, like if you see B and C, I would say or sorry, C and D, right? Failure to adapt to the transition to the college life and adjust various life domains in tune with the needs of the requirements of the college life, or inability to manage time is not there. That's not part of the passage at all. So we can't say that is the one. Uncertainty to pertain to the future, that's mentioned. That's mentioned in the passage. Right. Failure to develop romantic interest. This is definitely not the one. B is eliminated. Pressure from parents and society. This is again college. It's not about A. Society and parents. That's not part of it. So it has to be between C and D. And managing time constraints, etc. It's not mentioned. So failure to adapt to the transition to college life, it's because of that. Various things like that could be, as I said, multiple things, the transition towards independence, self-sufficiency, etc. All part of the college life. They are the reasons, isn't it? So definitely it has to be C. They are the reasons for the stress. Which of the following fall closest to the underlying assumption in the present study? Problem solving ability among us the students, among us college students is negatively associated with the symptoms of depression and anxiety. Now this one, again slightly tricky one. Now look at this, problem solving ability among us the students is negatively associated since they were talking about stress reasons, stress like other symptoms of anxiety and depression, etc. This is part of the passage, pretty much. Okay. However, is it like misunderstood? Is it misunderstood? Problem solving ability amongst students is negatively associated with. Now, what is the problem solving ability? Like there can be many abilities. They can be negatively associated with symptoms of depression and anxiety. If you read the last lines, many students experience their first symptoms of depression and anxiety during this time by and before that also failure to accomplish and develop these characteristics of development. Maintain independence may result in life dissatisfaction. Emerging adulthood has been also been noted to augment students' vulnerability to stress. Many students expect their first symptoms. So, whatever they try to do, I mean, whatever they try to achieve, problem solve, or whatever, that is associated with symptoms of stress and anxiety, isn't it? And whatever they try to make their life better, whatever they try to make their life better. For example, like sufficiency, self-sufficiency, or independence, or looking forward to the future, understanding future. They're all causes for the stress, isn't it? So problem-solving ability is part of it. I mean, yes, it could have been framed better. That particular phrase is throwing us off a little bit. I agree that it could be framed better, like how multiple elements in the college life are negatively associated. And it is true, they are negatively associated with the symptoms of depression and anxiety. That is the underlying assumption about, in this passage. Then only the author can actually talk about how these things are leading to depression and anxiety, isn't it? So, A will be the answer. Right? If you see D, for example, stress is subjective for each student. The moment that you say it, you are saying that college is not really the reason. College is okay and all, because it's subjective to each student. College has nothing to do with it, right? So again, that's not the right one. And C is obviously wrong. B, students lean towards unhealthy coping skills in order to try lower the stress they experience. Now we don't know. The passage did not talk about any coping skills as such, so we don't know. We can't say it's not relevant. A is the one. A is the answer. Next one, suggest a suitable title for the paragraph from among us the given titles. Now, see, again, it could be like A and B, close options. However, if you see, it's also talking about positives in the first initial lines. And we know first lines and last lines are very important. As we always talk about, first lines are extremely important. It kind of sets the tone for the passage. So we triumph and turbulence of the college system is the better one as compared to negative impact of the college education system, which is like a whole extreme of the other side. It is also talking about how it is like how college positively impacts people in the initial lines, right? So yeah, A is the one. Next one, with reference to the above paragraph, which of the following offers, sorry, with reference to the above paragraph, which of the following offers the most plausible solutions as a coping mechanism for college students? Individual students approach counselors for coping up with stress. Keeping in the view large numbers of students are experiencing stress, college must take. Now, this is where it is, right? It is talking about how college authorities, it's not about students. In the last slides, they were talking about how college has to take steps, right? College campuses do not have enough resources to help them, to help these students. So colleges need to have counseling systems, right? Counseling systems to help these students. So this will be a better one. If you see others, individual students should approach. As in, you are giving them the responsibility. It's not students. I mean, those they are dealing with enough stress and anxiety. You should be able to help them. You can't leave them to come to you, right? So colleges should take the responsibility. Leaving it to students is not right. That is not the same as well. So leaving it to the college authorities shall provide access to counseling, and every student experiencing stress must engage in some form of coping mechanism to alleviate stress. That is the important part. Okay, so we have come to the, I think, last passage. This one is probably in master question paper we have this, and one second, fourth one, isn't it? Yeah, we have this as the fourth passage in the master question paper, right? Okay. Next, so what is this about? It is about like how the minors, 16 to 18 especially, should they have their own say in their romantic life? Should they have the consent? Should they have the power to decide who their romantic partner should be? What their like consensuous relationships are, etc. Right. So this particular POSCO, which is like protection of children from sexual offences, it is talking about how even the consensuous relationships, which are like formed, as a relationship among like minors, that is also treated as assaults. Since we do not really see them as adults, we do not see their choices as adult choices, we consider that as also sexual offense, as an assault, right? That is what it is talking about. And let's see the questions. Minimizing the prosecution of consensual romances would also leave a logjam system with more space to pursue actual sexual assault cases. Now, logjam as in stuck, like kind of stuck. So, stuck as in, so these are the speedy prosecution of sexual assault cases is desirable. That is one way. See, if you say unreported, they're already reported. That's why they're like stuck. They're already reported. There is nothing that said logjam doesn't stuck in the like process. So A cannot be the one. B, a speedy process of sexual assault case is desirable. If you can focus on the right cases, they will be faster, isn't it? So B is a better choice. Let's see others also. Consensual romance in some cases can amount to sexual assault. This is not talking about it. Sexual assault and rape are different. Again, definitely not talking about it. So B is the answer. What has the author conveyed regarding the prosecution of statutory rape in India? Now, go back to this line, particular line. Uh, Look at this one. Okay. And the consensual relationship morphs into a case of statutory rape. What does that mean? Statutory rape as in minor sexual offense, right? Minors like 16 to 18 or something. So often consensual as in mutual agreed relationships are also treated as statutory rape, right? That is not correct. That is not correct. And here minimize, sorry, what has the author conveyed regarding the prosecution of statutory rape? So we know that statutory rape does not violate the Roman. As in the context of the passage, we know that statutory rape can be consensual too. We are treating it as statutory rape, but that's not. The people who are involved in it can be consensual too. We can't treat it as a statutory rape, isn't it? That's what the point of the passage is. So a definitely is the answer, but if you see B, statutory rape must be met with stricter punishment. Yes, but not in the context of the passage. This is generally true. I mean, if it happens as a rape in other contexts, but this is not talking about the passage. In the passage, we are talking about how consensual, as in two consented people relationship is also morphed into the type of statutory rape, morphed into like a statutory rape. That's what we are talking about. So in the context of the passage, A is the answer. Sorry. Okay, statutory rape must be abolished. Statutory rape must be abolished. No, that's not definitely right. The answer. Statutory rape is a relic of Victorian morality. It has nothing to do with relic of Victorian morality or anything. It has not talked about it at all. So nothing about Victorian morality. I mean, see, if you treat it like, okay, statutory rape is the problem of old people, old morals, etc. No, statutory rape is still a problem, it's still a problem. It is definitely a big offense, but we need to define it properly. We, in this context, it does not violate, necessarily violate. I think they should have framed the option better way. It either should say, either should not, or necessarily, does not necessarily violate. I mean, in the context of the passage, in these questions, definitely it does not violate, right? So A is the one. It's a tricky question. As for the above passage, which of the following does not correctly represent the author's view regarding the widespread persecution of teenage lovers under the POSCO Act? Now, like teenagers have the right to love as much as the adults. I mean, that's not what they are trying to say. Teenagers can consent to that. So. See, that's not can consent to, which is what it is like. We are not trying to say that they are adults. We are saying they have the choices that they can make as adults. So A can be included in the passage as part of it, but not directly. That's not what they said directly, but it can be inferred from the passage as teenagers have the right to love, right to consent, right to involve in relationship as much as adults. That's what they are saying indirectly, right? Police complaints of teenage lovers made mislead. That's what happens, isn't it? So that's what they are saying. Statutory rape. I mean, it is treated as assault, even though it is consensual. Consent of minor girls do not have legal validity. That's the whole thing is like POSCO Act. I mean, people, minor girls, they do not have the legal validity. Their say, their consent, their voice does not have the legal validity. Next one, consent of minor girls have legal validity, which is not true. So that's why this will be the answer. I mean, all the other three, first one can be inferred from the passage. Other two are also can be inferred from the passage. So definitely D will be the answer. In the above passage, which of the following has concerned the conscience of the Allahabad Court, High Court? I mean, if you see the conscience, like if you go back, the Allahabad High Court indicated how its conscience, look at this, is concerned by such severe POSCO provisions by being drawn by teenage lovers simply on the basis of family disapproval. So just because family is disapproved, they are harassing, kind of like, and they are kind of complaining it to the police and they are treating it as a bad case. So that's where the problem is. So that's why it will be D, Delhi. Harassment of teenage lovers by their families, right? That's where the conscience comes in. Carelessness of teenage lovers is not the one. Threat to the society, sorry, safety of the teenage lovers is not the one. Impact on mental health. The conscience invoked when they realized it is the families who don't approve, and that's why these kids are teenagers are harassed, right? So 134, D, Delhi is the answer. 135. As per the passage, which of the following is a major challenge to implementation of POSCO? Now, this is a very tricky question. There is a like B and C are very close options. If you see, right? As per the above passage, which of the following is a major challenge to implementation? Now, like the whole passage is talking about how we need to respect the choices of teenagers as well, how we need to go for their voice as well, consent as well. They need to respect, etc. So that way, B is definitely a good answer. However, counseling for adolescents and young adults, counseling is not part of the passage if you think about it, but still since they said major challenge to implementation, in implementation POSCO, the counseling can become part of it because respecting the rights of adolescents is not particularly a challenge as such. It is more like a something that has to go about, right? And yes, this question is definitely could be contesting kind of question, but however, B and C are very close. Even if you kind of like contest this, probably B also they will say this is the right one, but C can be fixed as the answer, right? C, because C and B are very close, extremely close. They are very similar in that sense. C is talking about counseling and B is talking about respecting. And since the main majority of the part It's talking about respecting B. Many people easily can go for B, Bombay. But C is also very close, and C is the answer, official answer. And that is the case. Okay. All right. So these are the questions that we discussed, and I hope you have done well with your questions and you analyzed your paper. And it's fine whatever you went through. And some of the questions could be tricky. And see, as we talked about, this is a medium level paper. The subject, like a critical reasoning itself, is like medium level. Some questions could be tricky, but that's fine. Average score should be around like 24, 25, and that should be even 22 is also a good score for you to reach the level, and good attempts also are needed for it. And we, hope for the best, and we will see what happens in it. And definitely, I'm pretty sure you would have reached at least 22, 23 in these questions. Okay. Thank you. I hope you got the answers that you are looking for. I hope you understood what we discussed so far. Okay. Thank you.